In this tutorial, we will explore some best practices for creating an accessible and inclusive PowerPoint presentation. We will discuss ideal slide design, adding alt text to your visuals, optimizing hyperlinks, reading order, and working with the built-in accessibility checker. So let's start off by opening up a blank presentation, and we're going to add the title for our presentation. So my title is going to be Making Accessible Media. I'm also going to add a subtitle. So I'm going to put in inclusive and accessible design for broadcast media. Okay, now that I've created that structure, the next thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to start styling it. So I'm going to come here to my title, and I'm going to highlight the title, and I'm going to come up here to my font choices. So we're always keeping legibility in mind. We want to make sure that the fonts that we are using are sans serif in order to facilitate easy reading. So here the default is Calibri, which is a lovely font, but for this example I am going to switch to Arial. So let's come here and let's choose Arial, and I want the title to be quite bold, so I'm going to choose Arial Black. I'm also going to switch my alignments here, so I'm just making some styling decisions just to make this a little bit more interesting. I'm also going to change my font size. So when we are designing our slides, it's always best practice to work with a font size that is a minimum of 18 points. Now this is my title and it is my opening slide, so I'm going to go pretty big actually, and I'm going to go to 80 points. Just to make it really nice and big and clear. So I'm just going to position that nicely here onto my slide. So making accessible media. Next I'm going to come down to my subtitle, and I'm going to style the subtitle as well. So again, I'm going to highlight my text, and I'm going to go in and choose Arial as my font. Keep it nice and consistent. Only this time I'll just use Arial regular. And currently this is at 24 points, which is a really great size for legibility. Next I'm going to take my subtitle and I'm just going to duplicate it, and I'll use this to create the date. So I'm going to just highlight this text and overwrite it and put the date for today. So I'm going to put May 1st, 2017. Now here, because I am building a visual hierarchy, I don't want it to be the same size. So I'm going to highlight the text, and I am going to go to 18 points with this. Remember that 18 points is the smallest that we want to go on our PowerPoint slides. And this way we can ensure that all the text is legible. Okay, you'll also notice that I've got quite a bit of white space on my title card. When we are designing our slides, we do want to make sure that the text isn't crowded and that it's got lots of breathing room, because that helps a lot with legibility. Next, I'm going to choose an interesting background color for my slides. So I'm going to come here into Design. Excuse me, I'm going to go into Format Background. And I'm going to open up my color picker here. I'm just going to go into more colors so I can see the entire color spectrum. When I'm choosing a color, I always want to maximize the contrast to make sure everything is easy to see for those who may have low vision, color blindness, or simply might just be at the back of the room. So if I were to choose something sort of dark, my text is black, and if I were to choose something like a dark gray, for example, this isn't really high contrast. Right? This is a little bit difficult to see, and for someone who has low vision, this would all blur together, and for someone who's colorblind, again, it wouldn't be very distinct. So we really want to work with high contrast colors, colors that are on opposite ends of the color wheel, as you can see here. So I'm going to go pretty bright, and I'm going to go into my yellows here. I'm going to pick a nice bright yellow. And you'll see the difference. If you look at that blue that I currently have on screen, and when I swap it out for the yellow, that's much more clear, and the color that I'm working with creates some really nice contrast. The next element that I'm going to add to my opening slide is going to be some branding. So I'm going to go into the Insert tab, and I'm going to insert a picture. So I have a logo here that I'm going to insert. Okay, and I'm going to move this into position. And you'll notice that I've placed this element. It is a JPEG, although it is text. But technically it is an image. And because of that, that means that it requires some alt text. So keep in mind that any graphic elements, even if they have text in them, that doesn't mean that a screen reader will identify it. So what we need to do is we need to go into our format picture, and we will select the size and properties menu, and then we'll open up our alt text. So it's important that we add in the alt text so that a screen reader will know what this says. So we'll just type in the actual words again. We are Humber. Okay, and then we will call this the vertical We Are Humber logo. Okay, so now for someone that is looking at my presentation with a screen reader, that image will now be identified as the We Are Humber logo. So that way none of the information is missing for someone that is using a screen reader or an assistive device. Now that we have all the elements on our opening slide, this is a really great opportunity to go in and use the accessibility checker. So PowerPoint has an accessibility checker built right into the program. If you go under your review tab, you'll see this button here, check accessibility. And when we click it, a panel will open up on the right-hand side. So we can see that our inspection results here, we have no errors. So far we've done a good job creating an accessible slide. However, there's a note here about checking the reading order. So what the reading order refers to is when we are using a screen reader or an assistive device, it will read the different text boxes. If you remember, this is 1, 2, 3 elements, and then our image. It reads them in a particular order, and that order currently is based on when we made the elements. And sometimes that's not always the most logical way that it should be read. So what we want to do is we want to check that by going back to the home menu. And if we go under Arrange and we want to reorder our objects. So what that does is it will show us, okay, this is what it's going to read first, which is the logo. That doesn't really make sense. And then it kind of goes backwards, right? Really, the first slide that I want it to read is the title, Making Accessible Media. So I'm just going to drag that up to the front and make that number 1. Then I'm going to make my subhead number 2 and the date number 3. And then really the branding is kind of the last thing I want it to read. So good thing I checked my reading order. Otherwise, someone that was using an assistive device might be kind of confused about what my presentation is about. Now that we've completed our first slide, it's time to move on to the next slide. So now we're really going to start thinking about the main slides of our presentation. So here what I want to do is I want to come to Insert New Slide, and I'm going to select a Title and Content slide. So for the slides that are going to make up the majority of my presentation, I am just going to stick with a white background. So I'm not going to continue the bright yellow through the whole thing. That could get a bit tiresome. So I'm just going to stick with the white background. Now, one thing to keep in mind, you'll notice here my accessibility checker is still running. And you'll notice that when I added the new slide, I now have an error. And the error says missing slide title. Every slide in your presentation needs to have a unique title. So let's add a title here. This is going to be Humber launches new course. Okay, actually, let's go here. New course. So now I have a unique title. You'll notice now if you check the accessibility checker on the right-hand side that the error is gone. So one interesting thing about the accessibility checker in both Microsoft Office and PowerPoint is that it's regularly updating. So as you are building your document, it's checking it, and you can correct your errors as you're working, which is very helpful. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight my title here. I just want to keep the fonts consistent, so I'm going to head over to Arial, choose bold, and now I'm ready to start putting the content onto my slide. So what I've done is I've actually put the content here in my notes. So I'm just going to cut and paste it from here. So I'm going to copy and then Paste it in. Okay, now this isn't an entirely bulleted list, so I'm just going to highlight the section that shouldn't be bulleted and just remove those bullets and remove this space here. Perfect. So I've got my content, and I'm just going to push this over because I am going to add an image, so I'm just going to split my slide here a little bit. Now, one of the things when we are designing our slides is we want to keep the information on the slide concise. So you'll see here that I only have 4 bullet points in one sentence. Probably don't want to do much more than that. The maximum number of bullet points you'd like to have per slide is about 6 or less. That way it helps with legibility. It helps people focus on what you're talking about rather than reading a really dense slide. So to make the legibility experience a little bit easier, what I want to do is I want to increase the leading. So leading is the space between my lines of text. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight my 4 bullets, and then I'm just going to come here into my styling panel and I'm going to increase the line spacing to 1.5. Now there's a little bit more white space. It's much easier to read. Okay. Great. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my graphics in. So I'm going to go to my insert menu. I'm going to go to pictures, and I'm going to go select the picture that I wanted to include here. Perfect. So I'm going to just make this a little bit smaller and put it onto the slide here. Now, if you have a look over at the accessibility checker, you'll notice that we have another error that's popped up, and that's the fact that this image doesn't have alt text. So keep in mind that every graphic that you bring into your presentation, whether it's an infographic, a shape, an image, clip art, all of these elements require alt text for someone who's using a screen reader. So what we want to do is we want to go into Format Picture. We're going to go into Size and Properties menu, and then we'll open up alt text and we will add our alt text. So the title of this image is On Air Sign. And then we'll give it a short description. So when we're putting in our image descriptions, we just want a really brief literal description of what is there in the image. So I'm going to put in a red lit up on air sign. There we go. So now if I hop back over to the accessibility checker, you'll see that there is no longer an error and everything's looking good. So the last thing I want to do is I want to carry over the branding from my initial slide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just grab this image and I'm going to copy and then come to slide 2 and I'm going to paste. Now you'll notice when I do that I didn't get an error in my accessibility checker. So one thing to keep in mind is once you've added the alt text for the image, if you use it multiple times in the presentation, it already has, it's been tagged with that information. So you can see here that that's already been filled out. So as I add this to every single one of my slides, I don't have to redo the alt text. So that's an interesting thing to note. Okay, I'm just going to position that. Excellent. Okay, great. So now that that's in place, there's one last thing I want to do to complete my slide, and that's of course to add the hyperlink to the website. So I'm going to add a new line of text here. I'm just going to come back to my notes field and I'm going to grab visit humber.ca for full details. So when we are including hyperlinks in our presentations, we want to make sure that we're not just dropping in an HTTP address just randomly. That's difficult for a screen reader. It'll actually try and read it as a word, so it won't know that it's an address. So it's better to have a more logical flow. So you'll see here it says visit humber.ca for full details. The HTTP link address will add it as the hyperlink and as the destination, but it's not something that actually needs to be on screen. So I'm just going to style this here again, making this Arial regular. It's 18 points. I'm going to make it a little bigger. I'm going to go to 20 and I'm going to just position it here on my slide. Excellent. Okay, and now I'm going to add the hyperlink. So I'm going to highlight humber.ca. I'm going to go to my insert menu and I'm going to select hyperlink. And this is going to be a web page. So here's where I'm actually going to put in the http:// www.humber.ca. hyperlinks.ca. Okay, that's going to be the destination. However, that's the text to display, and then we always want to add a screen tip. This will show up when someone hovers their mouse, and it will help them understand where they are going. So this is going to say visit humber.ca. And that way they know when they click the link, they know where they're going. So we're going to hit OK, and we're going to hit OK. All right, and then we can see that the hyperlink has some automatic styling. The underline is an important part of the hyperlink styling. If it was only blue, that would be a challenge for someone who might be colorblind or has low visibility. So we don't want to use color to indicate links. The underline is really useful in indicating that something is clickable. The next time you create a PowerPoint presentation, consider accessibility right from the beginning. Making your presentation so any audience can easily understand them is simple and easy to do. Working with the accessibility checker, using good slide design, using alt text on all of your images, using tool tips on your hyperlinks, and of course making sure that the reading order is in a logical and correct order. All of these little techniques really help make the presentation accessible for everyone.